big welcome. It's
Una
such a
bienvenida.
pleasure to welcome all of
Es
you to
un
the
placer
eighth
dar la
of our
bienvenida
9-month
al
cohort season
octavo de los 9
together
meses de nuestra
in
cohorte.
May of 2024. Welcome
Estamos
to
en
the
mayo
Land
de
and Housing
2024.
Coalition.
Bienvenidos a la
As you all
coalición
know,
Tierra y
we're a
Vivienda,
collective of
que es
over
un
60
colectivo de más de
congregations and
60 congregaciones
communities
y
across
comunidades
the
de
state of
todo
Oregon,
Oregón
discerning and
que
learning new ways
disciernen
to
y
steward
aprenden
our
nuevas
land,
formas
our
de
people, our
administrar
money,
nuestra tierra,
so
nuestra
that
gente, nuestro
all
dinero,
Oregonians
para
can
que
find
todos los
home.
habitantes de
I
Oregón
am the
puedan
Reverend Julia
encontrar
Nielsen.
hogar.
I am the
Yo
director
soy
of the Land and Housing Coalition,
Julia
and
Nielsen,
we
soy
are a
la
part of a
directora de
larger
la coalición
movement
y
home
somos
that we
parte de
call the
un
Sacred
movimiento
Organizing House that brings
que
together teams
llamamos
of
la Casa de
people
la Organización
committed to
Comunitaria
building
Libertadora, que
a
reúne equipos de
multi-faith,
personas comprometidas con la
multiracial,
construcción de un
multi-generational
movimiento
movement for
multirreligioso,
justice in the
multirracial y
state.
multigeneración por la
And
justicia
we
en
are
Oregón.
united
Estamos
by the
unidos por las
practices of
prácticas
community
compartidas de la
organizing.
Organización Comunitaria
So
Liberadora.
tonight, we're going to
Esta noche
continue to walk
seguimos
together
caminando
through the
juntos
organizing
a través
spiral.
de la
It's
espiral de la
where we learn
Organización
how to listen
Liberadora.
to our neighbors and ourselves and
Es
our
en esta
land
espiral donde
so that
aprendemos
we
a
can
escuchar a
hear
nuestros
what needs
vecinos, a
and
nosotros
pressures and
mismos
dreams
y a
are
nuestra tierra
present
para
and
revelar
take
qué necesidades,
action
presiones y
together
sueños
within
estén
integrity. And
presentes
tonight,
para poder
we are
actuar
going
juntos con personas
to take
íntegras.
action. We're going to learn
Esta
about
noche
action
vamos a
so that
aprender
we can
sobre la
build
acción,
collective power to move
cómo
out of
construir
isolation and
el
into
poder
community to share those
colectivo
resources of land,
para
money, and knowledge.
poder
So thanks for
compartir
being
los
here.
recursos, las personas, las tierras, el dinero,
Time
los
flies
conocimientos.
when you're building a movement for change, right?
Cuando
Last
estamos
month,
construyendo un
we
movimiento para el
tackled the
cambio.
art of
El
issue
mes
cutting
pasado
and dissecting those big
hablamos de
problems and
cómo
uncovering their roots.
recortar un
And
asunto,
I know some of you probably
rebajar
got
un
overwhelmed
problema
because
grande y
you felt like
encontrar
you have to solve a huge
un
problem in your
asunto.
own place.
Puede
And
ser
I
que
want you to take a deep breath.
se sientan abrumados, ¿verdad?
And I want you to remember that white
Quiero que tomen un
supremacy
respiro y recuerden
culture
la cultura de la
tells us
supremacía blanca nos
that we
dice
have
que
to,
tenemos
one,
que hacerlo
do it
solos.
alone. And two,
Dos,
that we have to do
tenemos
it
que hacerlo
perfectly.
perfectamente.
And three,
Número tres,
that there is only one
solo hay
right way.
una manera de hacerlo correctamente.
But in sacred organizing,
Pero en la
and
organización
especially when we're
libertadora
learning about issue
estamos
cuts,
aprendiendo
we are
sobre cómo
unlearning those things. We are
estos
learning
cortes,
that it
estamos
takes small steps to
desaprendiendo todo
solve
eso.
big
Estamos
problems.
aprendiendo que se necesita dar
We are
pequeños pasos
learning
para
that we
resolver
do
grandes
it
problemas.
together,
Estamos aprendiendo que lo
never
hacemos
in
juntos,
isolation.
nunca de forma aislada.
We are learning that we
Aprendemos que es
experiment
necesario
and we
intentar
sometimes
algo nuevo.
fail.
A
It's not
veces
perfect,
fracasamos y siempre
but we
evaluamos.
always evaluate. And we learn
Y
that there
aprendemos
are many
que hay
tactics,
muchas
not one
tácticas
right
a
way,
nuestra disposición.
available to us because there are many
Porque
perspectives in the
hay
room when
muchas
we are not
perspectivas
in
en la
isolation.
sala.
And that only happens if we're listening to
Y
one
solo
another, when
si
we
nos
are in
escuchamos unos
encounter
a
together.
otros, si
So
estamos
if you
encontrados.
feel
Si
alone,
te
it
sientes
is
solo o sola,
because you
es
have
porque
not done
no
enough
has escuchado lo
listening.
suficiente.
So have you done
Has
house
hecho
meetings?
tus reuniones
Have you
colectivas,
done your one-to-ones?
conversaciones uno a
If
uno.
not,
Si no,
then do them,
entonces hazlas.
because organizing is not a
Porque
straight
la organización
line.
comunitaria
If we
no es
want to
una
move
línea recta.
forward, we
Avanzamos,
also have to move
pero también
sometimes
retrocedemos
backwards
y
and
nos
sideways.
desplazamos lateralmente.
So we just
Aquí
happen to be
simplemente
teaching in a
enseñamos de
linear
forma
way,
lineal,
and you and your team may
pero
not be
puedes que tú
moving
y tu equipo
that
no se
way
muevan de esa manera.
because your
Porque
community
puede
may
que tu
not be moving
comunidad
that way,
no se mueva de esa
and
manera.
that's okay.
Y eso está bien.
However,
Sin
tonight
embargo,
we are
esta
going to
noche
pretend that we
vamos
have
a
moved from
fingir
month
que
1
todos estamos en
to
el mismo
month
lugar
2
para
all the way
fines
through
de
month 8,
aprendizaje.
and that we're all in the same
Que
place
ya
at the
después de
same time
pasar
for the
cada
sake
mes
of learning.
uno tras
And
otro,
I want
ya
you to
llegamos a este
think back
punto.
over all
Hay
of
que
those
recordar todo lo que
connections that we made
hemos
during
hecho
those months,
en esos
all the way
otros
through encounter
meses, en los
and
encuentros
unveiling
que
and
estamos
now action.
encontrar,
Last month was
revelar.
issue cutting,
Ahora estamos en la
and I want
acción.
you to remember how
Recuerdan
those stories
cómo se
pointed
hizo
toward
todo
a
eso de
clear
las
path
historias,
towards change,
cómo se llega al
and
cambio.
the way that people's stories
Y
that
cómo
we've
las historias
collected are all
se juntan,
disparate and separate,
que
and
están
then
por
they start
separado
to
cada quien,
point into a pattern,
pero
and
se
then
va
they
armando
come
un
together,
padrón.
and suddenly
Y
we
de repente
have the ability to have shared action.
podemos
That's where
tener un
action
problema
actually
compartido,
comes in.
problema común y
Actions
una
are
acción
the
común.
public muscle of our
Las acciones
organizing.
son
They're
la
how
fuerza
we
pública
show
de
the
nuestro trabajo
world
organizativa.
the power of our
Con ellas
community
mostramos al mundo el poder de
and the
nuestra comunidad,
strength of
la
our
fuerza de
voices
nuestras
unite.
voces unidas.
Actions grab
Las
the
acciones
attention
llaman la
and they
atención
put
y
the
presionan
pressure
a
on
los
decision
responsables
makers.
políticos.
And
Recuerden
turnout is key here.
que la
The more
participación es
people that we have
fundamental.
standing shoulder to
Cuanto más
shoulder, the
gente
louder
esté
our
codo a
message
codo,
becomes.
más fuerte
But
será nuestro
how do we
mensaje.
design an action that
¿Cómo
gets people
diseñamos una acción
motivated
que
and
motive a la
actually
gente
to
para que
show up?
realmente se presente?
That's what we're going to dive
Eso es lo que
into
vamos a estudiar
tonight.
esta
We're going to
noche.
explore different types of
Exploraremos diferentes
actions, how they
tipos de
build on
acciones,
each
cómo se
other, and
construir
stories that
unas
make them
sobre otras
actually
y las
impactful.
historias que puedan
So
hacerlas
we'll be
realmente
talking about
impactantes.
turnout that magic ingredient that
Hablemos de
transforms
participación,
good
que ese,
ideas into
ese
real
ingrediente
change.
mágico que
This
transforma
is
buenas
not a
ideas en
one-person
cambios
show, folks. It's
reales.
about harnessing the
Eso no es
collective
un
power that
espectáculo
we've built
individual,
together.
amigos. Se trata
So
de aprovechar el
that's
poder
what
colectivo
we
que
are
hemos
getting ready
construido
to
juntos.
practice.
Entonces,
Get ready to practice
prepárense
those
para poner
organizing
en práctica
skills.
sus habilidades
By the end of
organizativas.
tonight,
Al fin de esta sesión,
hopefully, you're going to walk
esperamos
away
que se
with a
lleven una
toolbox
caja
of
de
action planning
herramientas llenas de
strategies.
estrategias de
You're going to
planificación de
get to
acciones,
have practiced some of them. You're going to
practicar
have a little
algunos
more confidence
y tengan
to
más
get your
confianza
community fired up
para poder animar a sus
and turn
comunidades.
those stories into
Vamos a
action.
pasar de las
So
historias
I'm going to
a
turn it
la
over to
acción.
Janelli
Voy a pasar el
to
micrófono a
ground
Janelli,
us, get
que
us
nos va a,
ready to go,
a enraizar
and put us in the right heart space to
y
be
nos
able
vamos a
to
poner
receive some
en
of that
el
teaching
espacio del corazón.
and be there. So Janelli, I'd invite you to
Janelli,
ground us. Thanks a lot for doing
adelante.
that for us tonight.
Gracias.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Hello,
Bienvenidos a
I
todo
am
el mundo.
Janelli Carranza, and my
Yo soy Jenny
pronouns are
Carranza.
she,
Mis
her,
pronombres son
ella.
ella.
And I'm an organizer with
Soy
Love, Land,
organizadora
and Housing Coalition, as well as
con
with Together Lab.
Coalición Tierra y Vivienda
We
Eleven
are
y
getting
con
close to our
Together Lab.
organizing, to the
Nos
end of our
acercamos al
organizing
final de
cycle,
nuestro trabajo
friends.
organizativo, amigos.
In our journey,
En
we have
nuestro
heard some
viaje
hard
hemos escuchado
truths,
duras verdades,
listened to a bunch of
hemos escuchado a
folks,
un montón de
and we
gente
are thinking
y
ahead into what
estamos
is
pensando en lo que es
possible.
posible.
For our grounding
Para
today,
nuestro
I
raizamiento,
will read a
leeré
poem by
un poema de
Hafiz
Hafiz.
called
Se titula
It Felt Love.
El sentido
But
amor.
before I do,
Antes de leerlo,
I want us to
quiero
close
que
our eyes
cerremos los ojos
and think of the
y pensemos en
people
las
and
personas
land
y
we
la
personally
tierra que
love
amamos
and
personalmente
who we walk
y
with
con
and
las que
nourish.
caminamos y nos alimentamos.
Think of the folks that
Piensen
you walk
también en la
alongside
gente
and
con la
listen
que
to.
quieren caminar y a la que quieren escuchar.
I'm going to read the poem, and I'm
Voy a
going
leer
to
la
keep your
poema.
eyes closed as you think of the folks that are
Ciérrenlos.
coming to mind for you.
Los ojos, por favor, para que vayan pensando.
How did the rose ever
¿Cómo
open
pudo
its
la
heart
rosa abrir su corazón
and give to this
y
world
dar a
all
este
its
mundo
beauty?
toda su belleza?
It felt the encouragement of the
Sintió el
light
aliento de la
against
luz
its
contra
being.
su ser.
Otherwise,
De lo
we
contrario,
all remain
todos permanecemos
too frightened.
demasiado asustados.
How did the rose ever open its heart
¿Cómo pudo la rosa abrir
and
su
give to
corazón
this
y dar a
world
este mundo
all of its
toda
beauty?
su belleza?
It felt the encouragement of
Sintió el
the light
aliento de la luz
against its
contra su
being.
ser.
Otherwise,
De lo contrario,
we all remain
todos permanecemos
too frightened.
demasiado asustados.
I welcome you to open your eyes, friends.
Les invito a que abran sus ojos
As we walk through our time together
mientras
today and we are
caminemos
working on house
juntos
meetings,
hoy y
I want us
trabajamos
to
en las reuniones
remember our
colectivas.
community
Quiero que
is
recordemos
not in
que nuestra
need for
comunidad
us to save
no
it.
necesita que la
Our
salvemos.
communities are
Nuestras
in
comunidades
need of
necesitan
a
un
partner who will
socio
walk
que
alongside
camine a
them
su lado porque
because
tienen
they have
dones
gifts to give
que
and
dar
voices to
y
lift.
voces que hacer.
We need to nourish one
Tenemos que
another so we can all
alimentarnos unos
flourish.
a otros
Thank you.
para que
I'm
todos
going to pass
podamos
it over to
florecer.
Levita.
Muchas gracias. Para darle la palabra a Levita.
Good evening, everyone. It's good
Buenas
to be
noches a
with
todos.
you. I am Levita, and I
Soy
am an
Levita.
organizer with
Soy
the
ganadora
Levin
de
Community
la
Land and
coalición Tierra
Housing
y Vivienda
Coalition.
Eleven.
And I
Eh,
invite you
les
to
invito a
take
que
a
se
moment to think
preguntan
about
por un momento
the poem that you just
ese poema
heard,
que acaba de
and
escuchar
then to ask
y luego
yourself this
preguntarse
question: why is
esta
it
pregunta.
important
¿Por qué es
for me
importante para mí
to have
mantener
face-to-face,
una
one-to-one
conversación cara a cara de
conversations
tú a
with
tú
another
con otra
person?
persona?
Why are those
¿Por qué
conversations
estas
important
conversaciones
for
son
me?
importantes para mí?
And as you think about that,
Y
I
mientras
want you
van
to
pensando en
stay
eso,
anchored in your why
quiero
as we get
que
ready
se
to
mantengan
have mutual
anclado en ese por
conversations
qué
with someone for the
mientras
next 10
mantienes
minutes
una conversación durante los
about the
próximos 10
following
minutos sobre las
questions
siguientes
that
preguntas
Jules is
que
going to
Jules va a poner
post
en el
in
chat.
the chat. And the question is this:
Es una pregunta aquí.
remember a
Recuerden
time when you
una
attended
ocasión
an
en
event
la que
that
asististe
invited
a
you
un
to
acto
become
que
part
te
of
invitó a
something
formar parte de
bigger
algo
than
más grande
yourself?
que ti.
So think of a time when you
Recuerda una
attended an
ocasión,
event that
un
invited you to
evento,
become
acto
bigger
que
than
te invitó
yourself.
a formar parte de algo más grande que ti.
What did you take away
¿Qué
from
te
that
llevaste de esa
action?
acción?
And what did you feel
¿Y qué
move in you?
sentiste moverte en ti?
What did you see move around you?
¿Y qué viste moverse a tu alrededor también?
So ponder that for a minute or so,
Los invito a que
and then we'll
ponderen
go
eso
into a
y luego vamos
conversation where
a
you can share
pasar
your
a las
reflections
conversaciones
with
donde
another
puedes
person.
compartir qué es lo que
But think
ah,
about it for a moment.
te salió como respuesta a esas preguntas.
What did you feel move in you,
¿Qué
and what
sentiste
did you
moverte en
see
ti?
move around
Pues
you?
en ti. ¿Qué viste moverse a tu alrededor?
What did you take away from
¿Y
that
qué te
action?
llevaste de esa acción?
Well, welcome back, everyone. The fact that no one came back right away tells me you must have had some good conversations. And so I'm curious, are there a couple of you who would be willing to share with us what you heard? That would be wonderful if you're willing to be brave enough, and I will unspotlight myself so I can see you.
Well, I will share. This is Ellen from King of Kings Lutheran, and I will just share because Landon Housing, Levin Landon Housing is a part of my story, which is that I started out
An
with,
event where you felt
sorry,
moved. Okay, Ellen, are you talking?
yes,
Okay, go ahead.
yes. Well, I said I would just share a little bit of my story, which is that I'm a member of King of Kings Lutheran Church, and that I started out volunteering for maybe almost 2 years ago, looking at the where King of Kings was going to go and which direction we were going to go, because we're an aging congregation, losing members. What do we wanted to do? And so I was on the team that led the that investigated what we could do as a new mission. So that has now expanded itself into looking at housing for Venezuelan immigrants. And I'm the core team leader for that project. So yes, it's being swept along on those lines. So that's my little story.
And would you have imagined yourself doing this 20 years earlier?
Well, this specific thing or
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
leadership?
Yeah, taking leadership like that.
Well,
Right.
I'm taking leadership. I've had leadership roles many times in the past, but would I imagine being a leader in this particular instance? The answer would be no, but I'm happy to be here. So, and I talked to Shania, and Shania will share their own story later on out here.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, Ellen. Is there anyone else that would like to just share a nugget or a gem that came out of your conversation? As we continue to move through our teaching and our time together, I just invite you to, think about when do you feel like you are part of something bigger? And how does it move in you? And how does it change what you see around you? So carry that with you tonight as we continue with our session. And now I am going to invite Jules to join us and to share with us a teaching.
Thanks, Lavita. Well, friends, it's a weird thing to try to teach this kind of part of sacred organizing because every action is unique. And I think every one of us could describe a different kind of action. And it's a kind of a magic and constantly confounding question. What makes an action in organizing? And I want to give you a chance to think about this. So put in the chat, if you will, some organizing actions you've attended in the past. And I'm going to read them out loud. They can be recent or they can be older. Maybe they're ones that were powerful. Maybe they're ones that fell flat for you. They could be from organizations that you've been part of a long time ago, organizations you're a part of now. What was an action, a gathering that was supposed to move people and make something different that you've been a part of? Go ahead and put that in the chat if you would. Testifying to Clackamas County Board of Commissioners about the Turnkey Project. Yeah, that was just about 18 months ago, right, Mary? 2 falls ago. What else have you done? I know some of you were at the assembly in March. Community gathering in March 2023. Christy was at. The big ask we had at the Mass Assembly. Yes, Shania. Absolutely. Anybody else have one? Attending an International Workers' Day rally in Salem yesterday. Marianne was at from Creator. Excellent. So you have some images in your mind, okay? So the other day, a couple of us did realize it is kind of hard to teach people actually how to take action. Action, unlike a one-to-one or a research meeting or a house meeting, is a tool of organizing that's a little slippery. And the reason is because it's more of a collection of outcomes and components than it is a script. It's more of an art than a science, in part because it matters so much where and when it happens, and also who is doing it, who it's happening among. So I want you to pay attention to what makes an action an action. There's a couple of rules to them. One, it is a public demonstration. Actions are always visible displays of community power. So they can be large or small. It's not about size. It's not about size. It's about whether the force of the people gathered can leverage what needs to move. It's about the matching of the force of the people can leverage what is needing to be moved. And there's an old organizing saying that people power must be visible to have an impact. People power must be visible to have an impact. Okay, so it's a public demonstration. 2, it targets decision makers. Actions aim to get the attention of people who hold power in order to address our issues. So notice that a moment ago, I said all actions are a public demonstration of power. And what that means is not that they get media attention or that lots of people see them, but that the right people see them and that the right systems see them. True actions happen where they're witnessed by those who will be influenced by them. Otherwise, they're not actions, they're just activity. I want you to hear this. There's a difference between activity and action. There's a difference between activity and action. So, it targets decision makers. 3, they build community strength through turnout. Turnout is the fuel for action. So an action is never just one person because it always builds power towards something. Through increased participation, we always demonstrate the breadth and the depth of our concerns and that it will not stop until it's done. We won't stop. And we show we won't stop a couple of ways. One of those ways is by turnout, which is by mobilizing new people to participate in our actions. Strong turnout that adds new people to your base one by one builds collective power, not only by showing the decision makers and systems that we're powerful, but also by showing us that we're powerful and by showing those who are considering whether to join us that we're powerful, because we keep hope alive that way. Okay, so it builds our base. Of course, also, 4, it creates pressure. A large and committed presence puts pressure on decision makers to listen and to act. We want to constantly be putting pressure. 5, any action builds on or will, if it's an early action, will build on other actions. So they're escalating. Good actions escalate. So no action is just a one-time big impact showy event. Any good action is a part of a series of things responding to an issue cut that builds on one another and escalate until there is a reaction. So did I just say reaction? I did. Every good action isn't really about the action, it's about the reaction. And this can be intimidating and it can be counterintuitive. We actually want the reaction. Now, often we're like, oh, we want the action to be the end all and the be all. Oh, we planned so hard for this thing. We want it to be over, but it isn't. It isn't. An action's purpose is to instigate a reaction by the decision maker we're putting pressure on. Now, that reaction could be doing what we're asking, or it could be resisting us, but we plan for the reaction. What you're actually planning for is what's beyond the action. And that's the real purpose of the work. We want things to move, not to stay the same. And so if we are planning a good action, we're actually planning for what's beyond it. We're planning for the reaction. So those are the 6 components, if you will, of an action. If it doesn't have those components, it's probably just activity, not action. It's probably not organizing. It's something else. Not that something else is bad, but it might not be organizing. And I want us to think about that, okay? So designing actions is something that we can totally practice together, of course, and there are a few easy pieces, just like with house meetings or research meetings. And I want you to think about these pieces when you are designing actions. They're just a larger part of a larger strategy that comes out of listening. So 1, when you plan an action, ground yourselves. We always ground ourselves in what we're doing and why. Spiritual grounding, however you think about that. 2, tell some stories to animate and illustrate the problem. 3, do something, a ritual, a practice, etc., that puts pressure on the system to do something new, or puts some pressure on someone to create some tension, to surface some existing tension in the space, like refusing to leave the space, to give testimony, pinning somebody, making a radical invitation. We can even run actions on ourselves. We can put tension in ourselves. Always promise out loud to follow up. This is designing for a reaction, creates tension. We will follow up. We will be relentless. We will not stop until you say yes. And then we always say we're going to put focus pressure on the people in the room to commit to also follow up again for the next action. This also asks for a reaction, right? Will you keep up with us? Will you continue to put pressure on this person? Will you keep up and make sure that this continues to be something that you are committed to? So we ground ourselves, we keep putting on pressure, we have a ritual, we always have a story, something that animates the problem. We pin somebody, we have tension, and then we commit. Okay, so those are the parts of an action. And I want to give you some examples of actions. Some of these are going to sound familiar. A gathering of 25 people from the Queer Resource Center, from a housing developer, organizers, partners, and neighbors of the land, piece of land in Washington County, where housing is going to be built for Latinx and Asian American families from the community on Farmington Road, gathered to honor the land through ritual and imagined what might be possible there to build that new base of people and to build imagination about how we were going to move the neighborhood to accept those new neighbors. A door knocking campaign to move neighbors from opposed to in favor of a local tiny home village in Laurelhurst. A public assembly with radical invitation to religious institution leaders and decision makers to make a public commitment to give land away that they have responsibility for. An escalating series of gatherings outside of an ICE detention center to release people who are being held illegally. And public testimonies at city council and legislative hearings who are making homelessness illegal in their areas. Those are all actions that this group of people have been part of in the last 5 years, right? Okay. So I want you to think about those actions you put in the chat earlier and to think about how many of them fit those requirements. What was missing? What was powerful? How did they fit? How did they do? Remember, there's a difference between activity and action, that we could be doing a whole lot of things, but if they aren't building power or changing systems, they're not actions. Organizing can feel like a slow, fast kind of process. And we do it that way so that our actions are powerful, wise, and effective, because people's lives and liberation depend on it. So we want them to be deliberate. So we want to take good action. So when you all as core teams are making choices, go back to that list and ask, do they qualify under what makes a good action? And if you need help, ask your companion and your organizers to help you design good actions. And also evaluate, did we do it? And then adapt for the next piece. So I'm going to invite Shania and Janelli up front, and they're going to talk about an action that took place at Warner Pacific last year, at Warner Pacific University, that Shania was a part of, and talk through some of it. Some of it's going to sound like a good action and some of it might not. They're going to kind of analyze and evaluate what happened. And then we're going to get a chance to actually do some of that work too. So listen carefully and see what you hear. Thanks, Shania. Thanks, Janelli. It's going to be fun to hear what you bring forward.
Thank you. Hello, friends. I'm Janelli Carranza, and then Shania, do you want me to pass it over to you so you can introduce yourself? I was going to introduce you, but I'm like, you know what? You're strong. You know how to do it. You got this.
I got this. Hi, everyone. My name is Shania Berry. I use she, her pronouns. I am a fellow with St. Andrews. Shout out to the team. I know some of you are here. And I'm also part of Together Lab.
Thank you, friend. I forgot. Also, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm part of Together Lab, and I'm an organizer with Love and Landed Housing. Well, thank you, Shania. First, thank you for having this conversation with me. As you know, we have this whole house meeting campaign coming, and we're in the midst of it. And this actually reminds me a lot of when you were at Warner Pacific University and did something really similar, but you actually used house meetings as an action. And just to give context to folks, Shania, you and I were both part of a class with Dr. Trentaz where we actually learned organizing, but not only learned it, we did the whole organizing cycle in one semester. We organized, we had house meetings, we had one-on-ones with students on campus. And we did this in different years. I did it back in 2018. And Shania, you just did this last year, right? Which is great. But I'm really curious is when you were going through that process, how did you get to a house meeting?
Long story, but I'll take you guys through it. I got to Warner's house meetings because I was a student leader at Warner Pacific, and I was required to be involved in leadership on campus as part of my scholarship. My advisor was Dr. Trentaz, the teacher of the class, and she recommended that I join the community engagement class to both fulfill the credit needs and my scholarship needs. Personally, I wanted to join because I wanted to learn more about how to effectively organize the communities that I'm a part of. After the COVID lockdowns, Warner was struggling to maintain a sense of community. Many tenured professors and staff left, taking clubs and vital pieces of the community with them. As a part of the class, we did one-to-ones, and I met with 7 people, and other students did 3 to 5 one-to-ones as well. So there's a lot of information about the school being collected. And when we came back, we noticed a lack of community surfacing in all of our conversations and decided to focus on that.
My friend, you did 7 one-on-ones. I know because I was your mentor and you did great and you were an overachiever. So just shout out to Shania because I'm still really proud of her a year later. But that's great. Well, not great because of the lack of community, but it sounds really powerful to hear that, hear the same story being echoed across your one-on-ones and that you were not alone in what you were noticing. But how did you go into the issue cut before the house meeting?
Yeah, it's a good question. So during our listening portion of the spiral, we came together and we did like a little power mapping session. And what we noticed was surfacing from the students and staff around campus was that the majority of our listenings concerned a general lack of community on campus and an overwhelming feeling of isolation from both students and staff. There was little participation in the school events and divisions between students and staff. From that, we decided that the problem was a lack of community on campus and that our issue cut was demanding that admin commit to 3 very specific things to address this problem. However, we also figured that we could get people to get a taste of community and power through the house meeting, kind of a 2-for-1 type deal. This could act as a first step. We thought that this could act as a first step to connecting people around the same issue. Having them engage with staff and students was also a powerful because the administration could physically see the power we were coalescing. Like there's people actually talking to each other. And this put pressure on the administration before we even made the ask, because this is not something that usually happens at Warner.
Yeah, and Warner is a small institution. My friend actually was one of the directors at Warner when you were doing this. And I love her, bless her heart, but she was still part of the institution like that was not really helping with this. I love her again. But I remember like the anxiety that she felt around this, and I can tell she was torn between I want to help and also like I'm not getting support from like my fellow staff members to actually make change. And she just felt the anxiety of I see so many students that I care about wanting something, and like how do I help with that? But also feeling the anxiety of like, but what is my institution going to support me with in doing? And that was really powerful. I remember that, like even just showing up and folks showing up in a room full of people, that put a lot of pressure on the administration on, oh shit, like people are talking about this and we haven't listened to them and now they're meeting and talking about it. Shania, what came out of the house meeting?
So during our discussion and harvesting of the one-on-ones, the questions that surfaced was that what are the admin's perspective on the students? So the school identity has been promoted as like a small school with a strong community, but that was not our lived reality. I was spending most of my days in my dorm alone, and that was the case for everybody else. Another question that surfaced was how could we build a strong community with what we have? Connected to that was what would make us feel less alone. So we planned the first house meeting around those things. We would ask students and staff these questions, basically like interviewing them, trying to see like, what would you like to happen? What would you like to see what happen? Stuff like that. And more than that, we decided to like focus on communication and building power. And there was like this diverse presence of power that we noticed that, you know, students and staff were not alone in making this ask. From there, we had 3 teams of students and staff committed to talking to people about these power problems in the administration, specifically trying to help address this isolation that we were feeling. One ask we were asking them to show up for was for staff to actually show up to events. Another ask was transparency between admin and students on where we are headed and where the money was being allocated. This was not communicated to students, despite the money being our money. There were actually really simple, these were like simple doable tasks, but unfortunately we were told no, which actually caused another action where students and staff decided not to come back to the following year. Like many staff, many students, administrators all decided to leave and go to different schools.
Oh, friend. So it was an action that built on another action that built on another action, all based off the results of what happened. I remember when you and me were talking through this, you're like, should I say that actually we didn't get the thing that we asked for? And I'm like, yeah, because that's the reality of it. But we were persistent, right? We still showed up. And folks were actually really activated by that. It's like, I'm paying for institution and I'm being told that this is supposed to be a community-driven place, and that's not the reality. And therefore, like, I'm gonna take my money elsewhere and like do that. And staff members, like, you know what? I don't feel like I'm being treated well. I'm not going to do students the way I want to. I want to do the work that I'm really passionate about, and I can do that somewhere else. And that pressure, from what I remember, and actually Chelsea was, I think, like queuing me up on this. She was actually that, and like people not coming back the following year, and like key students and leaders leaving, was actually a really big deal, and made the institution that following year have to do an evaluation on what happened, because that was a big financial loss for them, which I think was crazy.
It makes me very happy that that happened because we'll get into it in a second, but I was really upset with the way things turned out. But even when things turn out bad in the initial, maybe long term, it can be great.
Yeah. And then what did a house meeting do for you personally, friend?
Yeah, so this house meeting surfaced a lot of feelings into me that I was not really able to talk about with students or staff before this point. Like I said before, I was spending most of my time in my dorm, not communicating to anybody. During our meeting, there was a lot of pushback and defensiveness from the leadership, which showed us that this problem was connected to broader problems within Warner. I personally struggled with isolation at Warner because I was the only trans woman at the school. This meeting made me realize that the problems Warner was facing was something that would not change overnight. And if I wanted something better, I would have to transfer to a different school. And immediately after that meeting, I made the decision to transfer. That was not the only realization, though. A couple of other key students actually left and transferred out. One of my friends, we were both the president and vice president of the Black Student Union, left, and some amazing staff members left as well. Because our ask was not answered, the students that left were leaders of clubs, like I just explained, and now like Warner doesn't even have clubs anymore. There are 0 clubs at this school. I know this sounds like a lot of loss, but even with such a huge action, Warner felt the repercussions of losing people and students that were not happy with this, you know? And this actually forced them to have a deep evaluation the next year. When they told us no, they were forced to do something anyways because of the actions we took.
Thank you, friend. And I'm wondering, I felt when that happened, I actually felt like a pit in my stomach when they said no. I mean, how could you say no to something that's actually really easy to do? And it was more so like we have the power and we don't want to because we don't have to. And I thought that was like the tone that we got, and I was really frustrated by it. But I remember when like I was organizing with Cassie, and it was my first time ever organizing and turning people out to an action. I had so many feelings, and I was super nervous. And I was actually really curious as to what were your feelings leading up to the action? What were you worried about? Um, did you think this would make a change, or like what excited you about it?
Leading up to the action, we were hoping for this to be larger for Warner Pacific. You know, this is a small school. We were hoping for 15 to 20 people. Because we wanted the university to feel anxiety and unknown pressure of people gathering like this in ways that have not shown up at the school kind of ever. They were aware of the conversation that we had. And I was personally nervous because 20 to 25 people were coming together in this small university. And although I like public speaking, I'm talking to a bunch of people now, that's scary to do in person. I was personally nervous that no one was going to show up. Like I had sent out a bunch of invites and people were like, sure, I'll go, but you never know if they're actually gonna go until they're there. And I was also nervous because I was a storyteller and was going to be effectively coming out to a large portion of the school that I wasn't comfortable being trans in. I was afraid that this would derail the conversation or that I would be further isolated and that people wouldn't want to talk to me ever again. But I was also excited to change the community and be able to create a means of communication between the staff and students, which was super important to me. I was also really excited to explicitly come out and claim my pronouns because I knew this would humanize trans people to a lot of people with a lot of less empathetic views of trans people.
I know like you and me worked on this like prior to, but I love hearing you like lean into that, especially since I knew you last year, and like you're just really powerful, friend. You're doing great. Thank you, Sanaya, so much for you and your time and sharing your experiences with us. I was really hoping to touch on house meetings as an action, and you did so much more than that. You told us about multiple actions that showed up. So thank you. And yeah, thank you. Thank you again. And do we have, Jules, we want to like pause, or do you want to pass it over to Anna?
Yeah, I mean, you have a couple of minutes. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if, since you do have just like, what do we have? 3 minutes? Is that right?
I
Yeah,
think so.
if anybody has questions for Shania and Janelli about that action at Warner, given what you've learned about what actions are, anything you want them to dive deeper into that will help you understand what an action is, since you have them live and in front of you? I'm curious about the reaction piece, Shania. Did you all anticipate the reaction that you got at all?
Honestly, I personally did not expect the reaction. To dive into it a little bit deeper, during our meeting, there was one person who kind of derailed it and was like taking power away from our narrative and talking about some other stuff that truly wasn't important. And I really thought that like the school's values would be in line with like communicating about these financial decisions or communicating about any decision being made on our behalf. But it really hurt me to find out that they just pushed us aside.
I also think
But
we weren't.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Janelli, go ahead.
No, I think we also weren't expecting. You think the administration's reaction, right, is what you meant? Yeah, I think that really threw us for a loop because there was a lot of anxiety leading up to it for them, and like they really want to be part of the house meeting, and to be like, well, we want to be part of it. It's like no, because we know you're gonna like try to like hijack it and like shift the narrative, right, and like not let people share their stories. So there was so much anxiety. I know there was a lot of worry. So when it finally came down to the asks, we were really surprised when they were just like laid back, like, no, we don't want to.
Yeah. That reaction is really interesting, and the reality is that you all did still get to feel your power though, right? Like it sounds like despite getting the no and everything that followed that you didn't anticipate in the room, the students still felt powerful. Is that true? So like you're checking the boxes of an action really, really well, even though the ask wasn't a yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the most important part was building that power within the students and giving them the space to hear that they're not alone. And that gave them the courage to like make the changes that were needed.
Yeah. I want
And I
you
think-
all in this room to hear that what Shania just said, that building power was as important as the change in the system around the target saying yes to what they were asking. That there are different ways to make change in the system, and that sometimes what you think you're going to change is not the thing that actually is going to move the thing. So that success may not look like what you anticipated when it comes to action. I really think that's important. I really think that's important. Sorry, Janelli, I don't want to steal that from you.
No. But I think I also wanted to add that it was within that building of the power that students were able to reclaim their power and say, you know what, I actually don't have to be here. And the institution was not banking on like students and key students, student leaders, and key staff to leave. So that really threw them for a role the following year where they had a really hard time finding student leaders to help lead things during welcome weekend. They were riled up. They were not expecting that. And it really caused a big it really turned the tables, I think, at Warner that year.
Great. Well, I'm going to stop you because we want Anna to be able to teach us a little bit about turnout. Thank you both for this really, and good organizing, Shania, and all the folks at Warner. I appreciate all the stuff you've done. All right, Anna, it's yours. Sorry, we ran a little
I
bit
love,
long, but
no problem. I love starting out with that story because that action Shania described had an impact on the community because of the people that she invited personally into that room, who then saw that they are not alone. There is no action without turnout. Can just by a show of hands, how many of you have heard the word turnout in this context? Okay, a few of us. Oh, how many of you have done turnout with your core team? Awesome. Okay. Turnout is the word that we use to describe the process of bringing people into the room to bear witness and be a part of what is unfolding in that room. This shows, just as Shania described, the relational power that we have. That this is not just like one passionate person who cares about this. This is a body of people. This is a force to be reckoned with. And turnout is so important that it cannot be an accident. It's a serious and organized part of every action. Speaking from experience, we can get so caught up in the perfect action that we make turnout an afterthought. And it's only when we arrive to the action that we're like, oh, you can't have an action without turnout, as it turns out. So it requires really counting the energy it will take to turn people out to your action and make space for it. I like to schedule it like an appointment, like any other thing that we plan well to do. It's one of the most important parts. Something that is very important to know about turnout is that I think actually we kind of know intuitively if we think about it. Turnout is not an email blast or an announcement. Though an announcement or email can be actually really helpful for turnout because it gives you ready, handy information that you can use. But I don't know if any of you have the experience either of making an announcement at church that you just thought was so compelling and nobody raised their hand, nobody volunteered from that announcement, or having a party, right? And you send an evite to 50 people. And unless you're super popular, people don't just respond to announcements. If I'm having a party, I think about who I want to see there. And I'd be like, hey, are you coming? I want you to be there. So these are individual relational asks. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what turnout looked like for Project Turnkey, which we just described. This is an action in which we, in Clackamas County, showed up and told our stories to a Clackamas Board of County Commissioners meeting to move commissioners to say yes to transforming a hotel into a desperately needed transitional shelter. So we turned out both people who were telling their stories as well as people who were just showing up with their bodies. We asked them all to wear green so that they could physically demonstrate their solidarity to that room and to the commissioners. And when we started organizing this action, we really actually started with turnout. We had a design team of folks all together in a room, and we started by visualizing the space and naming names. We said, who do we see in that room? Who do we want to see in that room? Whose faces who do we want to sit next to, Who do we want to bear witness to this? We asked who would care about this, or who might care about this if they came and bared witness to it. Something that's really important for me personally to remember with turnout is that I'm not asking a favor, a personal favor of someone. Like, if you love me, will you please come? I mean, maybe I've done that before, but generally it is inviting someone into the work of the whole because they already are a part of the whole. This is just making that invisible collective of people visible. And that's a gift. And that is actually absolutely what we found with the people that we had invited to show up for Project Turnkey. They were moved and changed by the experience because they felt how they were a part of that whole. In my living room, we each then chose 5 to 7 names. It's important that it's a small amount, especially if you're new to turnout. We didn't choose 40 names because you don't want to brainstorm all the people you could turn out. you want to brainstorm who you will turn out. You are making a plan. We then practiced our pitch together. So we each said like, okay, I'm going to talk to so-and-so. Why would so-and-so come to this? Here, like we role play together. I'm going to give you my pitch. And we kind of ended up operating from a shared script that helped kind of give us a starting point. And that helps us really feel confident actually about our ask to do a little bit of that practice. And then what we did after we put all that on our little dry erase board, we immediately started contacting people in the room together, which is, I will tell you, if you do turnout this way with a team of people, it will change how you feel about turnout. We made phone calls, we texted people. Sometimes I will send an intro text and say, I'd love to talk to you about this. And the reason we did that in a room together is because there's a reality, at least for me, that it requires peer pressure to like make a phone call. Does anyone else like actually have a hard time like calling? And I think it's a cool idea. And then when it comes time to do it, I'm like, oh, maybe I need a snack, you know? So this is like a time set aside where we had sort of collective energy, and it was actually really fun. It built energy. It didn't feel like a chore. It was like, oh, we're all in this together. And it's really fun to see how much power actually shows up in this room right now as we are contacting people. We are going to have some fun right now. We're going to break out into rooms with an organizer and give this some practice. So you'll start in your room with 3 to 4 minutes of journaling on the following things. Is someone able to drop the questions in the chat for me? Thank you. So you're going to choose an event coming up. Can you raise your hand if you have a house meeting coming up? A few of you do? Okay. Yeah, that would be a great thing to brainstorm around. That's a really good example. You can always make up an event or an action if needed. Just make sure it's something that you care about. And then number 2 is to write down 4 names of folks you would love to see there. So you're asking yourself questions like, who do I want to bear witness to this? Who would care about this? Or who might come to care if they showed up in this room? And then we're going to start writing a little draft of what we would say to them. You'll think through, why would this matter to them? And or why do they matter to this? I often do that in an invite, like, actually, here's what you will bring into this space if you are a part of it. What do they care about that connects to this thing that we're doing? So you'll sort of journal on that in your room and then for a few minutes, and then you'll have the rest of the time to talk with each other and your organizer, either about questions that come up as you're practicing or sort of workshopping it together. You might call on people to give a little example of what they're working on so you can hear from each other. An organizer will be in your room to help with all of this. All of our organizers have done turnout a lot, so they are a really good resource. Organizers, we will rely on you to kind of read the room and facilitate this portion, sort of focusing in on whichever part your room is most needing. Okay, and I think we are, Jules, do we still have how much time do we have in the breakout?
You'll have 8 minutes. Plus 1, right? Okay. As you're doing turnout, remember, we were just saying this in our group, like, keep it simple. Keep your language simple, keep your invitation simple. And also just be personal about it. We're people. We're human people. We can be people to people. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Levita so that we can honor one of our co-organizers and friends and neighbors. Levita, can you share with us the story and life and honor that is Victoriano?
Yes,
So,
friends, tonight we remember and honor Victoriano Cuevas, who joined the ancestors on Sunday, April 21st, leaving his Casa Moon and El Rancho community and family in shock at his sudden transition. And as we process our grief, we also celebrate his life and the love he shared with us. Victor found a place of belonging and became part of something bigger than himself as a member of the La Casa Común El Rancho Mobile Home Park Committee. A few days before his transition, the committee learned that a barrier had arisen in their actions for not being displaced. But Victor wasn't discouraged, and he shared words of comfort and encouragement with Yasmin and the other committee's members, telling them, hold on, something will happen, things will work out. And that's who he was. He was a person with a big heart who shared his strength and solidarity with others. He understood the sacred nature of the community and was proud to stand with the El Rancho committee members at the April Assembly. You can see him in the picture here. He loved tending to his garden and cared for the well-being of his mother in Mexico by sending her money regularly. And so tonight, as we remember Victor, we have the opportunity to send his cremated remains back home to his mother by contributing to a GoFundMe account created by Yasmin. And if you would like to contribute, you can copy or click on the link that will be shared in the chat. Oh, Victor, we honor your love. We honor you. And thank you for sharing your physical presence with us. And the continuation of your love is in us and in our descendants. And as Victor was transformed, may we be transformed as we encounter one another and all beings in this sacred spiral of life. Rest in everlasting power of love, Victor.
Thank you, Lavita. And thank you so much for that. Something I also want to add is Casa Común is actually hosting a barbecue for carne asada to really honor his life, because his wish really was to have like a barbecue and a carne asada and the community really coming together. And he actually really valued the work of the coalition. And he always said, we can do anything. Look at all the folks that always show up for us within the coalition. Look at all these beautiful faces that are willing to accompany us and be there with us. We can make anything possible. So we would like to invite you to his memorial barbecue carne asada. We will honor his life and his wishes to go out differently. We'll have a potluck style. So if you want to bring anything to share, please do so. It will be tomorrow at El Rancho from 5 to 6:30. And I think Jules put the link in the chat, which is great. And if you're able and willing to donate, so we could be able to send his ashes back to his mom, that would be wonderful. For next steps and for our work, our next gathering will be June 2nd. Can I get a quick view of the room? If we could, would we be okay and willing to be in person? Is that doable for us to meet in person next time? Can I get a show of hands if yes, in person, or in person? Awesome. I'm not going to make a decision right now because that's part of the collective, but we're going to grab that information and we'll let you know if we're going to move in person or not, because we also need to get some input from the folks that weren't able to be with us today. Our next gathering is June 6th at 6:30, and we'll let you know if we'll be in person or online. Please save the date for our recalentado, or our reheating of our conversations across with 1,000 people from the different house meetings we had statewide. But we also have homework, so do your house meetings. Get trained as hosts or facilitators, and listen to your community. If you do not have a house meeting in the books, contact your organizer, contact your companion. We are more than happy to help you move in that direction. And then also, please sign up for the coalition newsletters to receive team resources, videos, and action news. And you'll get that link in the chat. But for now, thank you all. Thank you for your time. Please show up if you're able to and call to tomorrow. And have a great rest of your night.
Everybody on the 6th. On the 6th.
On the 6th.
For our last gathering together. And we'll let you know if it's in person or online and communicate about that. See you then. Bye, everybody.